Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another First Friday sponsored by the Woodside Arts and Culture Committee, a group of like-minded volunteers here in the town of Woodside who try to bring forth interesting presentations, whether it be art, music, literature, anything that we feel might be able to create some interest with our audience. Now, this evening, we are fortunate to have a return or an encore visit with Robert, who's a fantastic photographer who will be sharing some of his old work, some of his new work, and just his thoughts and philosophy about photography, about the environment, and about life itself. You know, Dorothea Lange said, the camera is an instrument that teaches people how to see without a camera. And I think after watching Robert's presentation, you will understand a little more about how to see, which is the most important part of any photographic endeavor. So without further ado, here's Robert. Enjoy.
Good evening. My name is Robert Buelteman, and I make photographs. I appreciate you taking a little time out of your day to support the work of the Woodside Arts and Culture Committee. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge where we are. These are very difficult times, with a war in Europe, political division at home, a global pandemic, and hanging over all the existential threat of climate change. I doubt I'm the only person this evening who's lost a family member to COVID. And in light of these circumstances, I wanted to make a presentation that's a reminder for all of us about the fundamental beauty and dignity of the world and the simple joys of being alive and being connected to the natural world that gave rise to all of us. I'm consumed with what biologist E.O. Wilson termed biophilia, the love of life and of living things. And I hope that these photographs of our home, the San Francisco Peninsula, will give you a little bit of that biophilia as well. This, the view from Skyline Boulevard, looking down into Portola Valley, on a particularly beautiful winter morning. To set the stage for myself, there's a few things I want you to know. First, I'm not an academic, nor am I an expert, nor am I an entertainer, though it's fine if, if you find the evening's presentation entertaining. I'm not a philosopher, an intellectual, or an answer man for the great problems that face our kind, nor am I the second Ansel Adams. Rather, I'm the first Robert Buelteman, and my passion is making photographs that cultivate our appreciation for life as found in the natural world. In this modern era, when everyone has a camera, there are a lot of misunderstandings about this simple craft. Many believe photographs are made with the camera. In fact, the camera is just a mindless tool, and great photographs are made with the mind, the body, and the spirit. This, a very old and undisturbed buckeye tree near Mendigo Hill, I captured on assignment for the Peninsula Open Space Trust. Wilson believed, as I do, that all of us have a deeply ingrained love of nature, which is an intuitive and natural drive imprinted into our DNA. Many researchers believe this to be a reason that we've thrived as a species, helping us to locate the most fertile land, cultivate food, and our love of nurturing new life. I believe that we have a physiological need to be in contact with nature and the natural world. I know this is certainly true for me. Just think for a moment about how you feel after a day in the woods or up in the mountains. This view, looking due south from Montera Mountain across Pilarcitos Creek Canyon, to skyline and beyond. You see, I thrive at the nexus where humanity meets nature, and my art is an expression of that. My photographs are a place where the profound resonance between our lives and the natural world is revealed, articulated, and given form. I work to gather the everyday dust of the natural world, to revere, honor, and elevate it to its rightful place as the source of everything we have ever known and everything we will ever know. Indeed, my images reveal the world that you live in. And by you, I mean all of us, including the person wearing your shoes. I regard all my photographs, whether in color or in black and white, with or without a camera, as a call to awaken us to the abundant world that surrounds us and our ancient relationship with and dependency on it. This extraordinary sunrise greeted me one morning working on the Crystal Springs watershed. For me, making photographs is a form of meditation that calls up a special presence, an awareness that more often than not has to be conjured up, as like most people, I'm preoccupied with this business of living. You know, things to do, people to see, deadlines to meet, loved ones to care for. Unfortunately, this chronic preoccupation, this trance that we find ourselves in almost daily, represents much of what many consider to be a life. In the Zen tradition, meditation offers a window on that which lies beyond the trance. Zazen, or sitting meditation, is a means to this end. The Zen master, supporting his students, will employ his kyosaku, or awakening stick, with a light blow to the shoulders of the students who lose focus or fall asleep. This is not considered a punishment, and with more advanced practitioners, it is the student who summons the blow by lowering their head and offering a shoulder as a request for correction. This, bulrushes at dawn, Bean Hollow. And so it is with my work. My photographs are intended as a kyosaku for the eyes and mind of those of us who may have lost connection with our source, the natural world that sustains us. Here, the midday sun shines through a high-altitude ice cloud, revealing its prismatic colors. With respect to my landscape work, I'm sometimes asked why these tableaux, these vistas, show up for me. And the answer is simple. As I work as hard without the camera as I do behind it, to cultivate my awareness as a place where nature can reveal her unrestrained glory. In fact, in my best moments, I'm not even there. I've become a listening for the voice of the land. And like every other worthwhile experience in life, you must be present to win. Occasionally, this experience of being connected to it all is so moving as to become overwhelming. More than once, I've had to wipe my eyes to be able to see through the viewfinder. Another misconception about photography is that you take the picture. But in my experience, more often than not, the pictures take you. Like this one, made from Stage Road in Pescadero some 30 years ago. Sometimes nature reveals herself in the most unexpected of ways. I think the most moving experience that has ever happened to me as the result of my photography was in 1989 when I was working on the upper reaches of San Mateo Creek in the Crystal Springs watershed. San Mateo Creek is the principal feeder for the reservoir, you know, the one with the big dam under the 280 flyover in Hillsborough. The sun had just risen on an exceptionally cold winter morning and I was bushwhacking up the creek looking to find evidence of the 19th century lodge that used to be a retreat up the canyon there. Came around a blind corner, and there, laying before me, an immense deer buck, seemingly asleep and steaming with heat. I cautiously approached and realized as I looked at it that it had just died. I looked into its clear eyes, I touched its warm fur, and I marveled. What are the odds of all the places I'd been, of all the times I'd invested in my work, and the years I'd spent on this property, to end up being the sole witness to the end of life for this magnificent beast? It wasn't the first time I had felt, that I'd been chosen. I think we've all had such moments. And I felt such a reverence that I put down my gear and just sat with it for quite a while. Such things are possible when you open your heart. So before I set out to work, before I set out to make photographs, before I break out my gear, often while I'm packing my Volkswagen camper from the studio, I reflect on what I'm doing. What's the point of all this? And I reflect on the spirit that animates not just my work and my life, but life itself. This is the process that results in the photographs that I'll show you tonight. Pictures may be simply taken, but great photographs are made. Here, a Woodside oak bursting with spring buds. Now, some of you may already be familiar with some of my work, perhaps having seen some of my prints in Woodside's Town Hall, formerly at the Village Pub, Town Restaurant in San Carlos, or in too many local homes to count, like this 10-foot rendering of field mustard from my Life in Shadow portfolio, one of my cameraless works. Or in dozens of installations throughout Silicon Valley, such as this recent installation of multiple 96-inch dye sublimation prints at the new Park Point project in Milpitas. Or perhaps you've been to an exhibition, maybe Who Speaks for the Land at the San Mateo County History Museum, or Through the Green Fuse at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, or at any one of half a dozen solo exhibitions at the Gerald Peters Gallery in Santa Fe, or across the bay at Slate Fine Art. I'll get it eventually. One of 68 solo exhibitions I've enjoyed over these last 40 years. Last, you may have seen photographs I've made over the years for the Nature Conservancy, Sempervirens Fund, the Packard Foundation, or the Peninsula Open Space Trust. I remain in their debt for the work that they have provided me over all these years. So, tonight I'm doing something different. Sharing photographs that have never been published, but made with the same passion and commitment as my exhibition pieces. Most of these images have never been seen before, as I've carefully restricted my public identity to black and white landscapes and my cameraless botanical images that have received so much press worldwide. You may wonder why I would impose such a restriction on myself, and I'll address that shortly. This lichen-encrusted tree used to live in the Gazos Creek watershed, but was lost in the CZU fire. As a master photographer of people, French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson observed that there's nothing in this world that does not have its decisive moment. This is certainly true when working with human subjects, as this 1976 photograph of sunrise through the mounted patrol and live oaks above Sand Hill Road. But when working as a landscape photographer, I have completely different time horizons. This piece took 8 years of watching and waiting and waiting and waiting. When I first conceived of it in the 1980s, I knew that it required a very special set of circumstances. It required the season of spring for new shoots to emerge from the water surface, a windless day to flatten that same surface, an overcast sky to render a flat gray reflection, prompt action to avoid the broken shoots that get broken immediately with any kind of windstorm, which is common through the Highway 92 gap, and of greatest importance, morning light, because every photograph is about the light. In 1992, my patience paid off. I made reeds in water, and it became a key image in my monograph, The Unseen Peninsula. So I grew up here. I grew up in Woodside, had a talented family, and developed a love of the arts, music, poetry, and because of my father, a native Michigander, the outdoors, as we called it in 1959, when he snapped this photograph of my sister Ann and I blowing bubbles high atop Lanning Drive. As a student, I dreamed of being a poet, but quickly discovered that I lacked the skill, temperament, and talent for the task. Other than that, I was the right guy. So, nonetheless, I never lost my appreciation for the craft of the skillful wordsmith. One of the real highlights of my life was working with President Clinton's poet laureate, Robert Hass, when he accepted my invitation to write the introduction to my monograph, 18 Days in June, about the Gerasi Resident Artist Program. It was an education that changed the way I work. This question was asked by the late Lawrence Ferlinghetti in his poem in 2000, Are There Not Still Fireflies?, which he wrote in response to national grief following the loss of almost 3,000 American lives in 9/11. Are there not still fireflies? Are there not still four-leaf clovers? Is not our land still beautiful? So begins his poem of unbridled American optimism. These were good questions then and great questions now in the wake of over 1 million lives lost to COVID. Art can serve as a nurturing force in the human community. It can also serve as a call to action, sometimes even the revelation of a better way. A quick note about these images. Most of these images were recorded on film, like this one of a decisive moment capturing one of the centuries-old oaks on the Filoli property. The black border that surrounds these analog images is made by the opaque cardboard slide mount around the edge of the transparency. It tells the astute observer, that's you, that these analog images have never been cropped. I take great pleasure in working in the analog tradition with film and paper, as the joy of holding a physical artifact of my work in my hands remains after all these years. This image, made in 1976. In Yeats' 1819 poem, Ode to a Grecian Urn, he closes with these two now famous lines. Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all ye on earth and all ye need to know. This poem is a celebration of the way great art transcends time. With this, the concept of beauty no longer holds much sway either in the art world and certainly not online, as we have seen, but it does continue to animate my life as an artist. This, an echo of the previous image, but made some 30 years later from behind the fences at what is now the Woodside Horse Park. And with that, let's continue my tour de Peninsula. This, among the most wonderful views on the peninsula, and available to all of us. From the top of the 1,898-foot summit of Montera Mountain, looking across the Golden Gate to Mount Tamalpais to the north, with its unparalleled 360-degree view, the entire bay you can see from Monterey to Point Reyes. I made this image for the Peninsula Open Space Trust as a fundraising tool when they were working towards acquiring the land that would ultimately become the southernmost reach of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. My family moved to Woodside the year I was born, and over the intervening 68 years, my love affair with the San Francisco Peninsula has been a largely public conversation through the publication of my books and the work I've done for conservation organizations and other nonprofits. Working for Post and Sempervirens Fund were among the greatest privileges of my lifetime, giving me access to properties and vistas that otherwise would not have been available to me. This image, shot on the Crystal Springs watershed, ended up being adopted as Post's logo after its skillful conversion by their graphic designer. It still makes me smile every time I see it. In 1983, a few years before I began working for Post, I received an important commission from Sempervirens Fund to document the Butano Crossing property, now part of the state park. Sempervirens is California's oldest land trust and the founder, the progenitor of Big Basin Redwood State Park. Recently, they lost 83% of the land that they've preserved since the turn of the last century in the CZU fire. And while this painful loss is just a small harbinger of things to come, the land is regenerating and will continue to do so if humans can hold their destructive hands. I've also volunteered for the San Mateo County Parks Foundation, which supports our wonderful local parks, Huddard Memorial, and others. Among my favorite nonprofits, for obvious reasons, is the Gerasi Resident Artist Program, where I've enjoyed multiple residencies, taught workshops, and in the late 1990s, worked with Dale Gerasi to publish my monograph 18 Days in June to support fundraising for their endowment. Okay, so here's my reasoning behind why I don't exhibit my color work, as proud of it as I am. I think the best analogy is the distinction between the book and the movie. Only rarely is the movie seen as being superior to the book on which it is based. Have you ever wondered why? My theory is that as a reader, I develop a personal relationship and interpretation of the written words that is mine and mine alone. In the movie, I only see what a director and his team of creatives determined to be the screen story, removing my imagination from the mix and resulting in what I believe is a significant loss of, I guess intimacy is probably the best word for it. Here's a few examples from my 1995 book, The Unseen Peninsula, to illustrate this concept. So this image is from deep in the Crystal Springs watershed and was made on a very rare day. In fact, the only one in the 10 years I worked on it, where I took my 8x10-inch view camera and color film into the field. I just wanted to break the monotony of my black and white practice, thinking it might give me a fresh set of eyes to see with. So in this context, this image is the movie. Lovely, perhaps, but with a little detail left to the imagination. And then we have the book in black and white, Stagecoach Road. Personal taste notwithstanding, the book-movie dynamic plays out in photography, I think, pretty clearly. With black and white media, you, the viewer, you have to imbue the image with your own imagination and values, where the color image delivers all the pertinent information, sometimes weakening the magic of the relationship between viewer and subject, similar to the difference between a Rorschach blot and a line drawing. Another aspect of this preference is that black and white also has a timeless quality that I find important to the flavor and the romance of the image. So for me, color photography is about a record, about being in a particular place at a particular time, and black and white is experienced more as more timeless and personal, about a place in the heart rather than a place in the landscape, if you will. Another significant factor in my choice of medium is that making a fine black and white print takes a lifetime to master. It's something that I've worked for 4 decades and continue that work today. These landscapes, my black and whites, are images that are first seen in my mind's eye before I even set up my tripod. No digital slider prints these, where mistakes, carelessness can be corrected or adjusted on a computer after the fact. These are artworks imagined in the mind, and from the initial exposure through chemical processing to the final print are the result of hard-won craft and experience. Let's just say that my first 10,000 photographs were my worst. For me, nothing in the digital world can compete with the excitement of seeing the image that existed only in your imagination emerging on a piece of photographic paper in solution. Here in my darkroom in Montera is where I make my cameraless images, process my film, and make silver gelatin prints up to 40 by 50 inches in size. This is where I feel most at home. It also serves as my man cave, where nothing comes between me and my work. Now, in fairness to the previous color versus black and white examples, the color shots were never the focus of my attention at the time. But I think these images illustrate my point. And, there's no rules for art making. Using color for color's sake is completely valid and can also be very exciting, like this highly specific image of the celestial conjunction between Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, made from high atop Kings Mountain. I've been living in Montera, over on the coast side, for over 30 years now. And I love our little town, as it reminds me of, gives me the same feeling of close community that Woodside provided when I was raised there in the 50s and 60s. Living on the coast provides many opportunities for exciting photographs, like this long exposure through a dark gray neutral density filter of seaweed and rocks, revealing the flux of time. And, as we all know, a simple walk on the beach can yield moments of wonder. Montera is a town where we have nature at our feet, over our heads, and all around us. Backing up as it does to the GGNRA to the north, the 24,000-acre Crystal Springs watershed to the east, and the Pacific Ocean to the west, I'm daily presented with the wonder of nature in all her myriad forms. This multi-directional sign places my little town and its lighthouse hostel at the center of the world. And our tide pools at Fitzgerald Marine Refuge continue to draw their visitors from all around the bay. The southern reaches of the peninsula have their hidden jewels as well. This view, looking south from above the reservoir at the Villa Lauriston estate towards Mount Umunum south of Los Gatos. And nearer to home, we have the trail-heavy woods of Woodside, the Flagler Estate, and Huddard Park. Of course, I recognize that I'm not the only creative who inquires into humanity's age-old relationship with nature. Here on the Gerasi Ranch, a sculpture by Mauro Staccioli, national treasure of Italy. A few years back, I had the privilege of dining with him, and he told me that it's his intention with his work to make a grand distinction between the mind of nature and the mind of man. I think this piece succeeds in doing that. I continue to enjoy exploring outside my comfort zone, as with this 5'7" cyanotype mural on cotton fabric. It's unique in one respect. After 40 years of being with my wonderful wife, Julie, this is the only piece of art that we ever co-produced, with the notable exception of our wonderful children. We titled it Redwood Grotto, and it includes many of the flora found under these age-old trees. Trillium, big leaf maple, tan oak, bay laurel, and of course, the ubiquitous ferns that are found everywhere in the redwood forest understory. In 1999, after overseeing the printing of 18 Days in June in Italy, I came home and faced my disillusionment and disappointment with my efforts to use my art to awaken humanity to the imperative of redefining our relationship with our biosphere. I could see that even though black and white is a step removed from color, its representational character had become a barrier for my audience in seeing beyond the surface. In March of 1999, in a moment equal parts inspiration and desperation, I decided to move on from the traditions of my craft and surrendered the use of cameras, lenses, computers, and black and white film. I didn't know what to expect, and yet a new interpretation of nature, celebrating the aesthetic wonder of flora, was born in that moment. This piece, Descending Aspen, from my 4-year artist residency at the Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico. Over the next 20 years, I would expose thousands of sheets of now obsolete 8x10 transparency film, creating 4 portfolios comprising a total of 128 works, and felt that I had finally found the awakening stick that I had sought for so long. In the 23 years since making my first successful image, I have yet to come up with a compelling name for this technique. Originally dubbed energetic photograms to describe the high voltage electrical energy and fiber optically delivered light, as well as the old world photogram technique extensively used in historic photography. I'm still searching for the language that expresses the essence of these images. I invented the technique to step outside the traditions of photography, and it seems I've created something outside the structure of language as well. What would you call these images of ordinary plants? If you have any ideas, let me know. Just like Zen students meditating in the presence of a master asking for the support of the Kyosaku, I like to think that many collectors have acquired these prints as a gentle reminder of their connection with the infinite. Maidenhair Fern was a particularly difficult image, given the delicacy, detail, and diminutive size of the subject. It was collected with permission during my 4-year residency at Stanford's Jasper Ridge Biological Preserve in 2012. Occasionally, the landscape, as found, is so stunning that my photographs don't appear to be real, but I can assure you they are. This bountiful world of beauty, balance, and harmony is at our feet, if only we take the time to see it. I hope that tonight's celebration of our home might help pierce the illusion that where it's at is somewhere else. Seems to be part of our human condition, our way of being, that it must be better some other place, some other time, anywhere, any when. other than here, now. The development of this appreciation has become more important than ever, as we're all passengers on a warming planet, made more so by the result of our ceaseless travel, often in pursuit of this imaginary better place. After all, anywhere you go, there you are. I'm going to close tonight with the last stanza from Ferlinghetti. Is not beauty still beauty? And truth still truth? Are there not still poets? Are there not still lovers? Are there not still mothers, sisters, and brothers? Is there not still a moon full once a month? Are there not still fireflies? Are there not still stars at night? And can we not see them in bowl of night, signaling to us our manifest destiny? This presentation was made as a demonstration of my hopefulness and optimism. Yes, truth is still truth. Beauty, still beauty. In the face of existential global challenges, I remain hopeful. Life will go on. Our planet and whatever life remains on it will continue in its rounds circling the sun, whether we're here to witness it or not. Many of the solutions to climate change are now at hand. What is lacking is the will of humankind to get it done. As was written in China over 1,000 years ago, the Great Way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. And last, I want to thank the Woodside Arts and Council Committee for this wonderful opportunity to share my work and process. And you, yes you, the person wearing your shoes, for the gift of your time this evening. Come and say hello at buelteman.com. I would love to hear from you. And remember, beauty and wonder do abound. Good night, and thank you for your time and attention.
Wow, Robert, thank you. That was fascinating. It was interesting, and it was thought-provoking. So thank you for sharing your images and your thoughts about not just your images, but about life and why you photograph. You know, Ansel Adams said, "When words become unclear, I shall focus with photographs. When images become inadequate, I shall be content with silence." There's a lot to be said about just contemplating silence as you gaze at an image, or more importantly, as you gaze at nature itself. In fact, a photograph shouldn't just be a picture, it should be a philosophy. And we certainly have had a little glimpse of what Robert's philosophy is about photography, about his images, and how they affect him and how they affect others. Now, I want to thank Robert again for his presentation again this evening. And I want to remind our audience that Robert is participating in the Silicon Valley Open Studios. In fact, his wife, his partner, who does fantastic jewelry, will also be participating in the Open Studio. So if you would like more information, you should check out the Silicon Valley Open Studios and also check out Robert's images on his website. So remember, next month on the first Friday, we have our wonderful friends at Fioli. Julie's coming to give yet another fantastic presentation about this national treasure, this member of the Historic Land Trust that we have just down the road here from Woodside. So hopefully you will stay tuned and be back with us next month for another wonderful presentation. So in the meantime, stay safe and take care of each other. Good night.